The Whoop band subscription is essentially life insurance. Why? Because of the cost. If you go into the cheapest plan, which is 24 months, and it costs you 420 euros for this plan, then you calculate the yearly price to 240 euros, and then you estimate that you maybe will live 100 years, and then you say, okay, I still have 75 years left to live, and this results in 18,000 euros, and that's quite pricey. Oura Ring, for example, also has a subscription model, but you have to pay for the device upfront, and then you still pay around 6 or 8 euros a month. But Whoop, on the other hand, comes free, and this is something that is nice. You always get the new device, and I thought this was a kind of a good option. But I, at maximum, wanted to carry 2 devices here, and I already have 2 devices here. Obviously, I needed to replace the Casio watch, even though I really like the Casio watch, but I just didn't want to have multiple devices on one of my wrists. So therefore, what I decided to do is to not replace the Galaxy Watch with a Garmin device, because the options would have been, if I wanted to still track HRV, and that's the main reason I would have bought the Whoop band actually, HRV, just HRV tracking and low-key HRV tracking. I actually figured I maybe could just use the Whoop band and actually somehow add the Casio watch onto it. But this doesn't really make sense. Why? Because you want it actually on top, and the Casio watch also needs to be on top, and I think there is not a good way. If you took the Whoop band and turned it the other way around, and if it still would measure nicely, then you could add the Casio watch on top, but I think this just is a little bit too risky to try it. It's not too risky, I just don't think it will work. The Oura Ring, as I said, didn't really work for me because it's a ring. I don't know if I said it in this video already or in a previous one, but I mean, the Oura Ring seems really nice. It seems to be a nice product, it seems to be a nice app. I didn't try it, but the main problem is that I don't want to carry a ring. And there is also a huge risk to carrying a ring. There is a reason why whenever people do actually sports like basketball or something else, or sports where you can potentially hang the ring into something else and then it gets stuck into something else, and then your finger gets stuck into something else, but your hand might not. And this is a potential problem you have if you are wearing a ring. Another potential problem is whenever you actually want to use your hands to grab things, then you have a ring on your finger, which then puts stress on your joint. And so therefore I just don't think it's a really good long-term option that I will then use for the rest of my life, because with these data sets, of course you can sometimes export these data sets. Let's say you have the data set of Samsung Health and you want to export it into your Excel spreadsheet with all your health data. This is something that is possible. It is just not possible continuously over time, because you, at least currently, have to do it manually. In the future, maybe we have some kind of integration system where all our health data is in one place, but currently this is not the case. There is actually a service called Heads Up, which is trying to do this, but it also is not that good in trying to do this. I actually considered buying it. The lifetime subscription would be around 200 euros, and the subscription usually around 60 euros. So now, what are the options for me? The options for me are to replace a Garmin device, to replace my left wrist, basically, the device on my left wrist with a Garmin device. There is only a potential problem. I mean, I still want Samsung Health as my main health database. Why? Because that's where my data already is stored, and you cannot easily move it to Garmin, for example. If this was possible, then I would have considered changing or switching to Garmin. But there is also another downside to switching to Garmin. This is not only my fitness watch, it is also my smartwatch. And a Garmin is not so much a smartwatch, it is much more a fitness watch. It also is a smartwatch, you also can pay with Garmin Pay. The problem is it just is not Wear OS, and it just has not that much connectivity with my Galaxy device, for example, my Galaxy phone. So I considered the different options and I came to the following conclusion. Oura is not for me. I also have a problem with paying 18,000 euros to a company for the rest of my life. And also prices will increase, inflation, and therefore, and also they can adjust the prices obviously at any point in time, and usually prices are not adjusted downwards. So, well, I am not subscribing to, because there's another problem. If you store your device, if you store not your device, but your data on any service, let's say it is Whoop, then in order to have access to this data, you still need to be subscribed. At least that's from my understanding what this business model is. So therefore, even if I don't then have the Whoop anymore, if I cancel the subscription, and even if I just try it, that's kind of the reasoning I had. I just try it for 2 years, and then I just take a look at the data, not at a look at the data, but in between those years, during those years, I take a look at the data and I just I just decide whether it is actually worth the price. And then I could potentially get rid of it. But I cannot really, because if I still have to pay for access for the rest of my life, I can choose to either export it manually and then go back to the Excel spreadsheet, which is something I don't really want to do because it just takes time. It is a task that is recurring until the rest of your life, if this is something you want to do for the rest of your life, or until technology offers better solutions. But just for paying access even, I need to pay until the rest of my life if I want to have access to the Whoop data. And that's not something I'm comfortable with, I guess. And it's also probably just a very bad financial decision. Even though people like Brian Johnson, other people that use the Whoop band, other fitness influencers, not other fitness influencers, but fitness influencers on the web use the Whoop band. Well, it also only would be an add-on service because it actually doesn't have a screen, for example, and you cannot manually track workouts. Of course, this means that it is very minimalistic and very low-key, but I kind of am doing the following. I do track manually the workouts while I do intensively do things, and sometimes if I go for a walk for 5 kilometers, for example, I also track the walk, but I usually don't track walking or moving around or moving things around when actually moving to a different place, for example. I only track workouts, actual workouts, and this works quite fine for me. So I cannot transfer my Samsung Health data to Garmin Connect, which is Garmin's service. I also can't replace my Samsung Health data with Aura, for example, or with Whoop. Whoop would only be an add-on, and therefore I would have then to use two different services. Currently I use Samsung Health. I sometimes use Strava in order to kind of compete against my friends, but that is not something that is really worth my consideration. I actually deleted it recently because I just wanted to delete all apps with feeds in them, with feeds that potentially make you addicted to these feeds. So the decision then was that I would not buy Aura, I would also not buy Whoop, and because of the two reasons, I didn't want to replace my Garmin watch with something that doesn't have a display where I can at least display the time. And so the current option I think makes sense in the long term is to get into Garmin as an additional service, basically. Of course, there is the question, can you actually sync actively between services like Samsung Health, like Apple Health? And the answer to this question is that you can, but only partially and only sometimes unidirectional, not bidirectional. This means I can use Samsung Health as a source for other services, or let's put it this way. I could use Garmin Connect as a source and then sync the data to Samsung Health. Not natively in both apps. I think this was previously possible, but both services decided to kind of lock you into their ecosystem, so this is not available anymore. And so what you can do is use a Garmin watch in order to get your health data to Samsung Health. So I could potentially at least replace the watch, the fitness watch functionality, not the smartwatch functionality, with a Garmin watch. I probably would then still carry two, because this is a device I don't have to pay for anymore. It's a device I already bought. So therefore I would still use it in order to pay in the supermarket, for example, and also to just have a smartwatch that is actually quite a good smartwatch. I can, for example, start and stop the camera with this smartwatch because it is in the Galaxy ecosystem. So what I could do potentially is buy a Garmin watch, and then either have these two separate services or get rid of a Samsung Health tracking device and only use the Garmin device, then I would still be able to use those two services. And for this reason, I am considering maybe buying a Garmin watch in the near-term future. The other option would be that I just wait until Samsung watches get better, because currently I'm also not really, I just don't think the Galaxy watches are actually really good. It's just the standard I would like to have, and the standard I would like to have is to maybe charge my device once a day and not 3 times a day. I currently charge the Galaxy watch 2 to 3 hours every given day just in order to track workouts. Example, yesterday night I actually was out. I was with friends and then I went back. I actually ran back just in order to increase my total ran kilometers in my life. So I ran back, which is kind of weird, but I did it. So I then began to sleep and I just realized that my watch turned off because it didn't have battery left anymore. So in the morning then I charged my watch. So I charged it for around half an hour and then it had 39%. And then with these 39% I went running in the morning for 10 minutes. So the total tracked workout was 10 minutes. And then about 30 minutes later, I guess, the Samsung watch just displayed again that the battery is draining. And I should charge the watch. I mean, 40% is not nothing. So what I could potentially see myself doing is to buy one of these Garmin watches. And there are two that come to mind. Either I buy the best watch Garmin offers, and for my specific case, and also because I don't want to have a really big watch, I actually just want to have a small watch. That's also the reason I have the 42mm version of the Galaxy Watch 4 and not the bigger one. The cheap option to just get HRV tracking would be a Square watch. So it's called the Garmin Square 2. Venue Square 2, I think is actually called. Let's just look it up and I can show you a picture. It is called the Venue Square 2, and this is how it looks. It looks a little bit like an Apple Watch, and I also think that this is actually quite a good look, the Apple Watch look. It just looks a little bit crappier like an Apple Watch, and this is the potential downside to having this. Also, it would be not really symmetrical. I like things to be symmetrical, so I would have a round watch here, and I could therefore go with another watch. There is also a round watch available. It's basically the same model, and this then tracks HRV actually, and I can actually access the HRV data within Garmin Connect. Garmin Connect, on the other hand, is also just a more nerdy fitness tracker compared to Samsung Health. Samsung Health is made more for the masses that actually just want to increase their step count, and not so much for a power user or a potential power user like me. Not that I'm super sporty, but I would like to have access to this data, and Samsung Health is really made a little bit dumb, I guess. It's also very nice because it is easy and it is actionable, and it can be overwhelming. If you want to get into something like this, then maybe something like Samsung Health is a better start. But now I want to get more data actually, and I need to have HRV data. And here is the potential problem. If I don't record it now, I don't have a good baseline. If I record it only if I'm 35, for example, or 40, then I just don't know what actually my prime looked like in terms of fitness. And this is something that is actually a thought, I think, that is really worth considering getting into these devices. Because if you don't establish a baseline for where you're at with all these different measurements, like your resting heart rate, what was your resting heart rate when you were 18? What was your resting heart rate when you were 25? Or when you did this marathon and trained and trained and trained? Did your resting heart rate actually go down? If you only start tracking your fitness once your fitness declines, then you have the potential problem that you just don't have any baseline data. So this would be a very easy, a cheap option. It's 250 to 350 euros, I guess. There is also a music option that comes with Spotify. So basically you can listen to songs offline, which you in theory also can do with the Galaxy Watch. In practice, not so much, so you can't actually listen to it. It's just so buggy, it's just so crappy, you cannot download the songs, it takes forever to download the songs. Maybe it's because my Wi-Fi is not that good, but even if I have the songs downloaded and I just want to open up the Spotify app, it loads for like 30 seconds and I'm standing in a gym just waiting for it, and I cannot start my workout, and then I spent like 3 or 4 minutes just waiting for my watch in order to start playback of my music, and that's just not something I want to spend my time doing. So therefore I just don't listen to Spotify on my watch, even though the idea is nice. The same would be true for podcasts, and you can actually listen to podcasts over Spotify, but you cannot increase the speed on the watch because the watch is probably not capable of higher playback speeds. And now let's take a look at the second potential watch that makes sense, at least as of now. If I don't just stick with Samsung and I accept that Samsung's watches just don't have any battery life at all, at least after 1 year. And of course I could also buy the new Galaxy Watch 5, but it has the same processor, so it is also as delayed. So the interactions are not speedy as on a new phone, but they are just buggy. It's not that the software is buggy, it's just that you have to swipe, and also if you turn the watch on, for example, you have to wait for at least 30 seconds, maybe 60 seconds, until you can even do anything. The same is true for this phone now. After 3 or 4 years even, it came out in 2019, it's the Galaxy S10. And this is the second watch I am kind of considering, but it's really expensive. It's the Garmin Forerunner 955, and it also would be round, and there is even a solar edition, which means that you can, so in the outer ring there is actually a solar panel, and this means that it slightly charges when you are out in the sun, which is also nice because it prolongs the battery life. Potential downside is that there is a logo on there. The Galaxy Watch, for example, doesn't have a logo, and I don't like logos on things, and I also would not like to make current advertisements or advertisements all the time whenever I record videos. For example, if I had a shirt that was by a famous brand, then I would constantly make ads for these shirts and kind of endorse them constantly. So these are the two options I am kind of considering, but I also do think I don't want to worry about two watches. And also the potential problem is that, of course, I do have the Garmin Connect dataset, but if I only tracked HRV, then I still cannot sync Samsung Health to Garmin Connect. So then I would have to switch totally to Garmin and not use the tracking on this watch anymore. But then again, if I use Garmin Connect as a source and then just transport the data onto Samsung Health, then the problem is that this watch also comes with a few features which Garmin's don't have. For example, it records how stiff you are when you are running and then offers you improvements and things like these. And I would potentially miss out on these things. So this in total is why I first of all considered getting into HRV tracking or buying a device that actually has HRV tracking compared to Samsung Health, which doesn't. And it also doesn't give you access to this data. I actually downloaded all my Samsung Health data, and the HRV tracking is nowhere to be found. So, as a final conclusion, I think out of all the different options, Whoop made the most sense until you consider the price point. And at this point in time, at least, it, I think, makes now sense to actually get into a Garmin watch if you want to track more. Also, if you want to track anything that is actually a run, for example, then you just cannot do it with a watch like this. I also had the Galaxy Active before, the Galaxy Active 2, and I did 1 2-hour bike ride. And I charged the watch before, and afterwards, basically in the middle of a 2-hour bike ride, it just ran out of battery. And that's just not something that works.